afternoon. I would like to start by thanking the ASRM for making it possible to add this video to their programming. My name is Jillian Phillips, and today I'm here to speak in response to the Open Identity Gamete Donation What Are the Children Saying panel. I have a bachelor's in biology, a master's in public health, and I'm earning my master's of business administration, and I'm donor conceived. I was raised the only child of a single parent and grew up much like Lorelai and Rory did with the Gilmore Girls dynamic duo. A lot of my life, children were asking where was my dad, and I would simply explain I was made by science. It wasn't until many years later that I started seriously thinking about the fact that I could have other siblings, that I could have over 100 siblings, and it was always just out of reach. I never thought it would be possible to know my biological father because it was through an anonymous donation. My pediatrician told me that the only way they would be allowed to reveal his identity to me was if I had a life-threatening illness, like I needed a kidney, and they could not find a match. So going into college, I had accepted that I would never know him, and that the only information I would know about him was a single sheet of paper that had his hair color, his eye color, how tall he was, a little bit about his background. I knew what he studied in school when he donated, and that he had 2 sisters. And that's it. And I thought that that was all that I would ever know about him. So last year I tested with 23andMe, and I was fully expecting to match with a half-sibling or my biological father. And when I opened the results and my closest relative was a first cousin once removed, I was pretty disappointed. I thought that there were going to be other half-siblings out there that would want to find me. I had thought of that for years, and for that not to have happened was pretty heartbreaking. So I exited out of my DNA results and ignored them for the next about 6 months. And then in April of this year at 3 in the morning, I decided that I was going to figure it out. I logged back into my results and I took the information that I had about the first cousin once removed, and I built his family tree. I looked at obituaries, I looked at Facebook pages, I looked at LinkedIn pages, and I did everything I could to try and figure out who it was. And there was really only one person that stood out that it could have been. So I found the contact information for him. Took about a week of stressing and panicking about what exactly I was going to say before I sent a really long email to him basically saying, hey, I think I'm your biological daughter. And I spilled my soul out in that email, trying to tell him as much as I could and almost in a way try to will him to want to know me and try to prove that I was worthy to get to know. I was so afraid of rejection. I'd read so many stories of rejection on the Facebook pages and the support group pages that in my mind that was almost a guarantee. And I'm lucky enough that the next day he emailed me back and confirmed that he was my biological father. So we're about 6 months later from that, and kind of stumbling through trying to figure out how we fit into each other's lives. I've met a lot of his family, which has been incredible. He has a huge family, which I'm not used to at all, being the only child of a single parent, and my mom comes from an extremely small family. So that's been a learning curve in and of itself. And in addition to finding my biological father, I found out that I do in fact have a half-brother. My biological father has a son that he is raising. So it's not a half-sibling donor sibling like I expected, but I am very lucky to have him in my life. Growing up, I always wanted a little brother, and I asked my mom for years, and it never happened. And I don't know, somewhat in my heart, I always felt like I had a little brother, and turns out it was true. It took quite a few years because there's about a 15-year age gap between us, but I'm very glad he's in my life.
Nothing about us without us is a phrase often used when talking about disability rights, but it is important here as well. One of the goals of this panel is to learn how donor-conceived children are doing, but yet they failed to include a donor-conceived person on the panel. I would like to urge you to recognize how important it is to have the voice of donor-conceived people present, especially when talking about how we feel about our situation. Additionally, I would encourage you to refer to our community as donor-conceived people as opposed to children. So many times we are infantilized and our opinions minimized due to the reference of us being donor babies or donor children. We grow up, we become adults, and we have opinions. In 2020, We Are Donor Conceived conducted a survey of donor-conceived people. 481 people responded, ages 13 to 74. 87% of participants were between 20 and 40 years old. Here is a word cloud of different words that the respondents used to describe themselves about this situation. Curious, sad, isolated, misunderstood, unique, angry, disappointed, embarrassed, different, frustrated, numb, conflicted, isolated. In the 2020 survey, when asked how important it was for them to have a family health history for themselves, 96% agreed that it was important, 0% disagreed, and 4% were neutral. When asked if it was a basic human right to know the identity of both biological parents, 88% of respondents agreed, 5% disagreed, and 7% were neutral. When asked if all donor-conceived people should have the option to know their donor's identity, 94% agreed, 3% disagreed, and 3% were neutral.
The Donor Sibling Registry is something that probably every donor-conceived person knows about. They are one of the top search results when you Google how to find half-siblings, and a lot of people sign up desperate to make a connection. But there's problems with it. One of the issues is cost. While there is an option for a lifetime membership, so you wouldn't have to pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee, it's not attainable to every person. Some people ask for donations to be able to afford it. And I don't think it's right that someone feels like they have to put themselves in a precarious financial position just to be able to find out who their siblings are, who they're connected to. And two, donor numbers aren't consistent, but not everybody's given a donor number. Or one donor could have multiple numbers because they went to multiple places. Or it was shipped out to multiple states, and in those fertility clinics, they were given new numbers. So then there's multiple sibling groups, all with different numbers, but they're all related to the same person, and there's no way of knowing that through the Donor Sibling Registry. And so that's why I believe that instead of paying for that membership, well, I do recognize it has helped people connect. I believe that people should pay for DNA testing because that's the only sure way that you are connecting with people that are actually related to you. DNA doesn't lie.
It's an outdated registry not needed. DNA testing is the only accurate way to know biological parents and siblings. Anonymous DCP.
I have subscribed to the Donor Sibling Registry, but it has not led to any connections yet. I believe that the Donor Sibling Registry serves a useful purpose, but it is no substitute for a national donor-conceived registry like those that exist in other countries. If ASRM and the fertility industry truly care about the welfare of donor-conceived people, they should work with us to enact urgently needed federal legislation creating a mandatory national registry of donors and donor-conceived people. Tyler. I abhor the Donor Sibling Registry. The recipient parent financially benefiting from the donor-conceived people desperate for connection is at its best tasteless, in actuality exploitative and disgusting. I would never give her a cent. Jetty.
My parent registered me on the Donor Sibling Registry soon after my birth. I connected with a few donor siblings from birth. It was really great to know them all my life. Quill.
So open IUD donation, which is essentially the donor-conceived person is given access to their donor's identity when they turn 18, is basically good in theory but not in execution. You're still making people wait until they're older, till they're 18, to find out who their biological parent is. It's built on the concept that fertility clinics will keep track of the donors for 18 years and then be able to connect them with their offspring. And in that time, the biological parent could change their mind and decide that they do not want to be connected with their offspring. They could move, change phone numbers, change email addresses, making it impossible to track down. The fertility clinic or wherever the records are kept could go out of business. There could be a fire, there could be a flood, there could be all sorts of reasons that records get lost. And then the offspring are out of luck. In my case, I cannot find any records for the fact that I exist. Everything starts at my pediatrician's office. The one sheet of paper that I have outlining the few characteristics of my biological father, it only exists because my mom kept it and had it scanned in at my pediatrician's office. Everything else is gone. There's a forwarding number online where I'm supposed to call for this fertility clinic, but nobody knows why that number's there. The people that answer the phone have no clue why I'm calling them, and they have no clue who I should talk to. That brick wall that I'm facing is one so many people face. And I was an anonymous donation, but I still exist. There should be a record of my existence, but there's not. So many other people have reported that their records were lost in floods or fires. And if those people were open IDs, that information's just gone. So that promise that they would be connected years down the line has just literally gone up in smoke.
Some people assume the donor will be open to a relationship if the donor is open ID. Then they learn that this is not always the case and are sorely disappointed when the donor wants nothing to do with them. It's like a bait and switch situation. Beth. Open ID is 100% better than anonymous, but known from birth is the best option. You don't know what will happen in 18 years to the donor or the child. It's also so difficult to attempt to build a relationship with someone after all that time is lost, even if both parties want to. Haley.
OpenID often results in similar damage to the donor-conceived people, most notably not getting the opportunity to connect with a biological father or mother from an early age. This makes it difficult for a donor-conceived person to have a healthy opportunity to integrate these kin, culture, and family history into his or her identity. There are many donor-conceived people, myself included, with Jewish donors or biological fathers and non-Jewish legal parents that experience grief and crisis as adults from not having had the chance to learn these complexities of Judaism and Jewish culture from a young age. Tyler.
It should be a human right for every human to know their genetic background and medical history. The questionnaire does not even begin to help a donor-conceived person when needing vital medical history, especially those of us who are sick and have no access to continuous updated medical history of our biological parent. Anonymous DCP. I'm not yet 18. I always preferred to know as soon as possible. It was called Open Donor. However, several years ago we discovered the bank changed the rules on Open Donor to contact only through them, and specifically excluded learning the donor's identifying information. Instead, we DNA tested and found him a few years ago and have contact. Quill. My view of open ID donors has evolved due to my increasing awareness of the psychological and physical effects of unknown and misattributed parentage. We know from psychology research, generations of adoptees, and historical and world literature how crucial identity formation is, the effects of genealogical bewilderment, and the lengths humans go to find themselves and their kin. Why are we continuing to have anonymous until 18 marketed as open? How much more suffering will the industry continue to cause under this ploy? Donor identity should always be known from the beginning. Cassandra. I used to view it positively because it was an improvement over indefinite anonymity. But over time, I realize it is only the slightest improvement. It's not big enough improvement for me to endorse it. I will not support donor-conceived people being denied knowledge of who their biological parents are for any amount of time. Beth. In my opinion, OpenID kind of misses the mark. It does nothing to provide medical information for the donor-conceived person at a young age. It does little to shift the narrative or consider the needs of the offspring produced. The possibility of some vague connection, 18 years down the line, doesn't do much that a home DNA industry hasn't already done. It's better than nothing, but it feels more like a bit of an empty gesture than anything else. Anonymous DCP. Donors and donor-conceived people will have medical concerns before the donor-conceived person turns 18. Yes, contact could be facilitated through the clinic, but many donor-conceived people have experienced issues with getting accurate information from the clinic. It does not help the donor-conceived person build natural relationship with donors. It is easy for donors to change their mind about being open to contact after 18 years of radio silence. Haley.
As the moderator of a 15,000 plus member Facebook group with members from all parts of the triad, I've seen time and again how frequently donor number matches aren't accurate after people DNA test. Additionally, the number of floods and fires that strike industry record storage sites is statistically unlikely, to say the least. The industry's record keeping is not trustworthy. Jetty.
Absolutely not. Every time I've spoken to the Cryobank that was used to conceive me, they have given me inaccurate information. They have inaccurately conveyed medical history and my donor's interest in contact. I would not know this if he and I hadn't contacted each other through different means than the Cryobank. Anonymous DCP. OpenID may attract donors who are willing to have a relationship with their offspring, and discourage persons from donating who would like to pretend that they never donated. OpenID may cause a potential donor to think more about the consequences of conceiving biological children. Beth.
Identity should not be a corporate or state secret. It must be considered a human right. Albert.